Hi folks, it's the most gorgeous spring day in February. To celebrate the occasion, everybody is out of doors. The church bells are ringing in celebration of Eastery stuff. There's people blasting off with shotguns. There are people with lawnmowers. The birds are going crazy, building nests and singing to one another. It really is a very bad day for doing voiceover. Today I want to talk about this. It is, of course, the KTM 790 Duke. I don't know if you've seen the video of Chris Fillmore racing up Pikes Peak on the 790 Duke, but I watched that video and I thought to myself, I have to ride this bike. So I went into my local KTM dealer, which is Fowler's in Bristol, and they kindly agreed to let me have one for an hour. Anyway, briefly, it's an 800cc parallel twin. It might just be the neatest parallel twin ever. It puts out 105 brake horsepower, which is pretty decent for an 800cc engine, never mind a parallel twin, and it weighs in at 169 kilos. Stylistically, it's very similar to the 390 Duke and the 1290 Super Duke. In other words, it's styled as a naked bike. So anyway, I put it into sport mode and headed out into the wild urban wasteland of North Bristol. The area where I live is afflicted with mobile speed camera vans. There aren't just a few of these, there are dozens of them, and they move around. You fly around a corner, zap, they've got you. You come over the crest of a hill, zap, they've got you. It can be lurking at the end of a long straight. You look up, you see a white van in the distance, and you think, oh bugger, and they've got you. It's impossible to ride a motorcycle without thinking every moment, what speed am I doing? And the problem with the 790 Duke is it's a license killer. It's much too smooth. It didn't matter what speed I was doing, I could have added another 20, 30 miles an hour and I still wouldn't have known what speed I was doing. The only sensation of speed is a steadily increasing pressure on your chest. The engine's just too smooth. Ideally, you want a bike that starts to vibrate and shake at 40 miles an hour and becomes lethally unstable at 50 miles an hour. I had a 1952 BSA twin that was like that. I always knew what speed I was doing from the many signs of impending death. Probably the best sign was the fact that the suspension would jerk to one side when I put the brakes on, so the bike would head for the ditch quite reliably. And of course the 790 isn't like that. It's like being in the Matrix. It's that feeling that the traffic is stationary and you can just ride around it. The bike is constantly nagging, faster, faster. And the little voice in my head is saying, license is precious, speed cameras are our friends. I think KTM has been on a roll for the last few years. Something I've noticed with bike manufacturers, mostly the big four Japanese manufacturers, but not exclusively, is that they look at the bike market, observe what's currently fashionable and raid the parts bin to cobble together a new model. Occasionally, by random chance, they get it right, but often the results are second rate or frankly lamentable. The other approach is that engineers are given an R&D budget and a cleanish piece of paper and can go away and design a bike to do a particular job. In the early 90s, Honda did that with the Fireblade. More recently, Ducati did it with the Diavo. Their brief was clearly to produce a cruiser, so they designed a bike that was hilariously quick, it could handle, and it could stop. And this was in a market segment where bikes are supposed to be slow, monstrously heavy and handle like a supermarket trolley. Boy, did they screw up. Anyway, KTM seems to be letting proper engineers loose on their bikes, and it shows. The 790 feels like a precision instrument, a Rolex on two wheels. It's the sort of bike that would have seemed unimaginable 20 years ago. Flash, sharp, refined, futuristic, almost alien, all angles. The KTM house style isn't going to appeal to everyone. It's what the British call a Marmite thing, after a spread that's so strongly flavoured you either love it or hate it. KTM is like that. If you're the kind of motorcyclist who wants a bike that reminds you of the past glories of motorcycling, a timeless hymn to the 1950s and 1960s, then this bike probably isn't for you. On the other hand, if you're one of the billion 20-year-olds alive at this very moment in time, this is the golden age of motorcycling, and you might well aspire to one of these. Some things I thought I'd mention. None of them are major things, just relatively small things. I should have disabled the quick shifter. I couldn't be bothered going through all the options. I only had an hour. Now, there are times and places where I would use a quick shifter, typically after several hours in the saddle where my hands are getting tired, but not for scuttling through urban traffic. There are a number of places on the video where it looks like I'm short shifting from first into second, and I'm not. I'm just messing up my gear shifts because I'm using both the clutch and the quick shifter at the same time, and it's a mess. And that spoiled my enjoyment a little bit. Second thing, ground clearance. in a few cases I found my foot dragging on the ground. I had not expected that. I didn't think I was riding particularly quick. And it surprised me that I should have reached the point of dragging my feet so quickly. Third thing, suspension. It seems a little hard for British roads. British roads are not nice roads. They're patched, they're repatched, they've been filled in, they've been dug up, lorries have gone over them, they're corrugated. And there were a few cases going around roundabouts where I was like this, and the front was doing this, and it clearly wasn't soaking up the corrugations. And I was, instinctively I found myself slowing down because it wasn't really doing as good a job as I'd hoped. So it did seem a little bit hard to me for British roads. The exhaust note. Now, the KTM 790 Duke has a remarkably good exhaust note. It's a twin, it sounds nice, but all Euro bikes have been nobbled in the interests of emissions and noise. They have a catalytic converter that pretty much soaks up all the exhaust note. It doesn't really matter what sort of end can you put on, you never really get a nice motorcycly sound out of it. And there's a guy called Royal Jordanian who posts videos. He cycles around central London on a Husqvarna Nuda. If you haven't seen his videos, you should watch a few, particularly on the Nuda. It's a very similar bike to the 790 Duke. It's a parallel twin, naked bike, awesome. And in my opinion, with a full exhaust system and a remap, the 790 Duke could sound absolutely brilliant. Something I had expected and didn't notice was the fueling. When I rode the 390 Duke, I found it was snatching a bit in, I was doing about, in third gear, 30 miles an hour, I found it was a bit snatchy. And I'd read reports that the 790 Duke was doing the same thing, but I didn't notice that. So that was nice, actually. I found it was actually very civilized in traffic. So anyway, those were my observations. It was a remarkably refined, pleasant bike to ride, and I didn't notice much to comment on. And now I'm going to rain on the parade. I don't know why I do this. I never get any thanks for it. You'd think people might appreciate a little bit of truth and disclosure and honesty, but they don't. But anyway, here's what the rain looks like. Here it comes, here it comes. In 2002, the Fireblade of that year weighed 168 kilos and put out 154 brake horsepower. That's 1 kilo less than the 790 Duke and 50 brake horsepower more than the 790 Duke. And of course it had all the other bells and whistles, the adjustable suspension, la la la. It was a Fireblade. It had been developed continuously for 10 years. It was a very refined bike, bulletproof engine. And it wasn't a track day special. It wasn't some kind of fettled, breathed on, spend £5,000, get your extra bells and whistles type Fireblade. It wasn't that. It was the bog standard Fireblade. You walked into the showroom, you said, I'll have that bike, and that was it. So that's the rain. That's all I'm going to say. Well, I'd like to say more, but I won't. That's all I'm going to say. So thank you very much, and until the next time, goodbye.